Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. If you're not aware, I'm releasing a series of interviews with a group called the Medical Self-Defense Network, which is an awesome network of kind of different medics around the world, whether that's paramedics, combat medics, nurses and doctors, or herbalists, like people organizing kind of grassroots healthcare. Yeah, it's a really amazing mix, and it's been such an honor to interview everyone. And if you haven't listened to the first episode, I suggest you do. It's with a comrade called Kolya from the Medical Self-Defense Network, introducing what MSDN does, how they organize, their kind of origins, some of their political perspectives. And this episode is going to be looking at, what is medical self-defense, right? Like we talk about, some of the political and practical principles, like the complexities of things like professionalisation, the differences between kind of grassroots and state healthcare projects and the relationship between them, as well as, like how do we build power in like a kind of horizontal way. And yeah, one of the kind of beautiful takeaways I love is how Kolya defines self-defense, which is as structures that make systems of oppression obsolete. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Please check out the links in the show notes to the MSDN website. I really encourage you to follow the Twitter, to donate, and just kind of contact them and support them in general. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the interview. Welcome back. For folks who didn't listen to the first podcast introducing the Medical Self-Defense Network, I really strongly encourage you to check it out as a kind of good introduction to what the network is up to. But we are joined again with Kolya to talk about like what is medical self-defense, and we're going to be kind of talking about the politics and the context like in a bit more detail. But for people who didn't listen to the first podcast, can you just briefly introduce yourself, your pronouns, and like any political affinities or projects you'd like to include?
My name is Kolya. I'm from Medical Self-Defense Network. I'm an anarchist. Thanks for inviting me to speak here.
People will probably see this come up in their podcast player and be like, what the hell is medical self-defense? So yeah, for people who have no idea what that term means, can you give us a little bit of your perspective? Maybe you want to share what self-defense is in general, like in our kind of political context. But yeah, it'd just be great to hear kind of like the basics of, what that term means to you and, why it's part of MSDN.
Right. So I think to touch upon that question, it's very important to discuss what self-defense is in the first place, because I think we can understand in different ways. For us in Medical Self-Defense Network, self-defense, first of all, means the structures that are designed to make systems of oppression obsolete. And one of the most important elements of that is constructing the social fabric and the mutual aid in it. So self-defense in that meaning is not simply a question of like survival on personal or collective levels in a direct, like physical way, but rather it is a broader interconnected web of structures and relations that ensure survival and autonomy, as well as physical and non-physical defense, like broader preservation and continuation of the way of life as we want to live it. And the way we want to live our lives and the way we live them today can be quite different, right? So I don't know, maybe that last part doesn't have to be included, but last time when we talked about self-defense, like I think it's also important, like why are we defending? And I was speaking before that from that perspective, we are constantly under attack, like as a society, right? Some people might say that, there is no society. There are just like atomized individuals and groups who do not connect as an organism, as a society, as it should be. And I would agree with that, but that's also for a reason, right? We are living in capitalist patriarchy, and that the nature of this system is that it tries to destroy what it cannot assimilate. So that is conducted by the state, a highly authoritarian structure seeking to control and dominate. The domination is the ideology of it. So I think it's important to express that this is our perspective on the self-defense. This is what we're seeing as a self-defense. So that's like a broader explanation of it. But I think also specifically, it's important to talk about like what are we defending actually, and I think we're defending few things that I could name as like the right to exist. Even that's not a given. Within that right to exist, we're defending our integrity, and we defend each other in our relationships. We're also defending the earth that we all live on, and we defend our dreams that we want to live on that earth. But last but not least, I would say we're defending our collective freedom, because that what enables all of these things, starting with the right to exist and the integrity and having each other in our relationships, but also achieving our dreams and living on this earth requires the collective freedom. And we have to defend from all of this, internalized and institutionalized oppressive behaviors, structures, and tendencies, a lot of violence that they bring, and all the social conditioning that makes that possible. But also, more like structurally speaking, the very monopoly of the state and the state institutions on every important aspect of the society, of the life in a society, right? So that's broadly speaking, politically, what is self-defense. And I think one last important distinction to bring, I think, is that we can talk about two types of self-defense. Let's say first being direct one, as reacting to immediate aggression, like all living beings do. Every living organism has this self-defense system of also every living organism has a direct self-defense response against the danger. So we are reacting to immediate aggression, and that is a way of self-defense. I think where medical self-defense network is organized is a more broad understanding of self-defense, where we are based on broad understanding of self-defense, which is more in the realm of social relations, shaping the ways of life and collective dynamics, proactively building alternative structures to address our needs. So it's taking the focus away from a direct physical element of self-defense, to bring this perspective of an organism, right? It's it is, and any self-defense is a whole organism. It's a whole system of elements that make sense when they work when they work organically. So while using these necessary tools and tactics to create these structures of self-defense, we are basically, what we're doing is we are countering highly organized and coercive structures that seek to control and dominate. So I think that's how medical self-defense network is situated in the healthcare. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think it's very, very inspiring in terms of how it's framed. Of I really love this statement about self-defense being creating structures that are designed to make systems of oppression obsolete. And I just wondered, what does that look like in practice in terms of medicine or healing or, so that was one question. The other question is what have been the kind of political influences for this framework, right? Because I know lots of different radical and revolutionary traditions throughout history have used some of this language. The Black Panthers come to mind first, but I also know the Kurdish freedom movement and the revolution in Rojava have framed things in this self-defense frame, and I just wondered what kind of political influences have shaped MSDN. I know we both identify as anarchists, and I know that not everyone in MSDN uses that identity or that language, but my perception is that people do have a shared vision of kind of liberation and But yeah, what have been some of the kind of political influences into this kind of understanding of self-defense?
Right. To answer the first question, like how does it look in practice? I think that in practice, in healthcare, having that self-defense would mean organizing a holistic and accessible health system that offers healing to people, like general the society, without creating dependent patients. And yeah, I guess like in practice that means that, like, imagining a healthcare system that is organized based on a very different principles, and making such things like the transfer of knowledge, or the exchange of knowledge, the whole like philosophy of health and healing, the tools to do it, and let's say a strategy of organizing a healthcare system on like a national scale, but also like addressing crisis, and organizing this kind of people-centered organizing and solidarity and autonomy of organizing these necessary structures to build this independent strength, like this independent power, and fulfill all of the existing needs of all different people. That's kind of what this healthcare system is like in a nutshell. And I think I think that's how it would look like in practice. Should I come to the second question?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
definitely we are influenced all. I think sorry. Definitely, the network is influenced by all of these things that you have mentioned. I believe that. Okay, I'm thinking how to answer that. Yes, definitely. Like, we are inspired by all of the movements and different contexts that you have mentioned. But I also think we're inspired by like the living world itself. Just, if I would like stand up from here and go to the forest and I'll look around myself, I kind of say exactly what we're trying to build now. Like, we're trying to build an interconnected ecosystem of like human society, and that that is like so big. That's like a very grand vision, but we have to do our little part. Like, we have to be that little tree that also takes the steps in that direction, even if like the world and this struggle is like really big and scary. We still have to take our little steps. So I think that's also what is inspiring us: the plants, the animals, the humans as well. I think that's where our inspiration lies as well.
Amazing. I think it's always really important to name that, like to name non-humans as like a source of inspiration and strength. So on the MSDN website, you write, to heal means to connect with people and to build communities of trust. Therefore, healing, medicine, and free access to them are key pillars of communitarian self-defense. I was just wondering what you mean by communitarian self-defense?
Well, I think it references like a communitarian society, which is something I would like to see and something I would like to live, which is like, like a self-organized, horizontal, free society where people can live their differences and be themselves, but also base their relations on free agreement and solidarity and helping each other on mutual aid, instead of domination, control, coercion, etc. So I think for that kind of communitarian society, within that kind of communitarian society, within that kind of communitarian society, healing is like super important, right? Because we are not starting from scratch and we don't exist in vacuum, and all of us are having that experience of living in patriarchy, in capitalism. All of us having this experience of living this life, so that also requires healing. And we will not live like a self-organized, free society. Just how do you call it? Like with a whim of a like magic stick, or what's the English?
I'm terrible with metaphors. Like I get them wrong like all the time. Yeah, people laugh at me because I'll be like, "Oh, it's like raining sheep and horses." And they're like, "Nicole, it's meant to be raining cats and dogs." So, we can say like whim of the magic stick. Like that's fine. So you're saying that like this society is not just going to happen, right? Like it needs like investment in creating it. Is that what you mean or
Exactly. Like we need to invest our lives into it. It's like, if it's like if I was injured by an aggression, let's say, or if I like fell down or something, I need to heal. I need to restore that. I need to restore that soundness, this integrity of myself to become healthy again, to restore my healthy state of being. Right. So I think the same thing goes for the society. Like we have so much trauma and so much wounds on that organism, and us being part of that organism, we carry these global traumas and these global wounds in ourselves as well. So I think, yeah, that's where it's leading. I think that living differently and organizing our lives according to different principles and logics is essentially a process of healing and a process of essentially it is a restorative process. Yeah, that's like I guess a whole like really deep topic, because to restore something we need to know what's the healthy state that we consider to be as such, right? Like what is the healthy state of being for the society we live in, right? And I think there is no one like single answer to that. But yeah, I think that requires a lot of investment and discussion to yeah, I don't know. This last part can be cut out, but as you like.
No, I think it's really interesting. And I think it leads to like the next question of like how does kind of MSDN like define like healing and medicine? Because like for me, for example, as like a herbalist, like I will see people one to one, as well as other projects and organizing. And it's like I just always come up against the like systemic factors, right, affecting health. So someone having like chronic stress because they're doing a job that they like really hate, or because they're like healing from some kind of like childhood trauma related to like poverty or racism or the prison system. And like, it's just yeah, it's so hard to support people one to one when you can see these like bigger things going on. And I just kind of feel like, yeah, maybe it is better to do like some housing campaign to like address like the mold in houses, for example, to prevent respiratory infections rather than trying to treat everyone with medicine, right? And like our healthcare system, like in terms of like higher care, like often, we're taking someone to hospital who's really in that crisis point of needing support in that moment. For example, if they're hypoglycemic or something, it's kind of like, sorry, I'm going on one now, but like, I'm just trying to say like, yeah, like for me, this stuff is so politically important because we are like constantly on the defensive, right? Like we're treating diseases that have been caused like, over decades of time, which have been like an attack from the capitalist food system, from chronic stress, from capitalism, from patriarchy and trauma. And yeah, like we do need that like bigger social struggle and that bigger social change to create like a different culture of healing, so that I don't have to spend the rest of my herbalist life like treating these like long-term conditions like relating to just like unrelenting like oppression. But yeah, that's my little rant. But I just wonder like, yeah, how does MSDN relate to these ideas of like medicine and healing? Because obviously you have medics in the network who are, like they're professional paramedics, they're potentially working like within state institutions. You've also got medics that are, trained as paramedics but are, working in like more autonomous structures. And then you have like other health workers or like herbalists like myself. So yeah, like obviously like it's a huge area, right? Like health is so massive. So yeah, like how do you define like medicine and healing, and the things we're talking about?
I am very much on board with your definition. I think that's what we mean also by saying that like we need that we need an accessible like health system which is not like creating more dependent patients. And I think that's like really connects like with what you have been describing about the mold and about like treating particular cases of people who have been injured by that or by by like some of the bigger like structures and systems. I think that having this perspective of how health is connected to how we live and to how our life is organized and to what kind of systems into what kind of systems our lives are organized is key to understanding how are we living, right? So I think this perspective of healthcare is also very instrumental to like understanding politically where we are at, because if we understand our, let's say, our lives as organisms, and if we understand some of the like oppression we face as like illnesses or as like aggression and danger in our environment, then the perspective of solving the cause of the injury and the cause of the unsafe environment is very important to healing, because we can recover as much as we want, but if we don't solve the issue that have caused the injury, we will never truly recover. We will never reach that point of being healthy. So from that perspective, I could also say that recovery and like health and healing is not only restoring let's say a state of being healthy that you had like some time ago, a year ago, or like a day ago, or maybe 1,000 years ago, as like on a scale of society, right? But it's also about creating that environment and creating these ways of living that ultimately create the well-being, right? So I think that's how I would see healing and medicine. Like, yeah, I guess medicine also, like a few words on medicine. I think medicine is I see medicine as a methodology of healing, like um as a, let's say, like a knowledge system and a practice that facilitates some of our efforts in the healing. Of course, medicine cannot address all of the aspects of the healing. Some aspects of the healing do not include. Some of the aspects of the healing are more like addressed by. Sorry, I'm trying to like see how to say this. Yeah, like basically, I think medicine cannot address like everything. But I think it is like an important like methodology to facilitate our processes of healing.
Nice. And like, yeah, I saw on the MSDN network about having like this word like professionals was used, and like I think it maybe like activated something in me from like, because herbal medicine is such a kind of delegitimized field of healing compared to other modalities of healthcare, which are generally like state kind of state sanctioned. But yeah, I just wondered like why that word was chosen and what that means to MSDN, and like what kind of like what like spaciousness and openness is there in terms of like other forms of healing, because that's also like a big part of the work, right? And on the website it you also include that. And I know from people's work in like Rojava and northeast Syria, there is this like big support for like autonomous health projects and for herbal medicine projects and women's health projects, and like like things beyond just kind of like standard like higher state healthcare. But yeah, I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit, like this kind of trajectory of professionalization and like like some of the strengths and weaknesses of that.
Sure. Thanks for bringing this up. This is an amazing point. I think that that we we don't consider professionalization as the necessary criteria in terms of like when we speak of state sanctioned kind of like recognition, right? But at the same time, we can look at a professionalization from a different angle as like knowing your field real well, right? Profess your craft in a in like an advanced way, in a ultimately mastered, or like not ultimately mastered, but like professing your craft in like a deep in a deep and advanced way. So I think in that way, I see people who know their field really well and know what they're doing really well as professionals, whether they do have, whether they do have like an official education or not. And that is the case with herbalism, as you mentioned, how it's been like treated often by also some of the health professionals from like the conventional healthcare system, like ignoring like actual like people's knowledge from the generations and generations and generations, and ignoring how that's been like a huge part of like health in basically like all societies on earth. So yeah, I think it's very important to say that we do not mean professionalization necessarily in like an institutional way, but more like this, the way of like knowing your craft. Let's say it like this. I don't know. Is this a correct English?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really beautiful definition of it, because I think we touched on it in a different podcast interview, actually, that people will be able to hear about harm reduction in Tennessee. And we talk about this, like the challenges of like, say, the not-for-profit industrial complex, and how like lots of healthcare structures are like assimilated into like state systems, but then at the same time like wanting to like organize like the highest quality care possible, and like not to harm people, right? Like one of the principles of medicine in general is like do no harm, which seems insane with like the amount of side effects on medications and medical errors because of like lack of resources, because of state austerity and blah 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 blah. But it's kind of interesting that like it's just a balance, right, of like knowing what you're doing, because it's really important. And if you screw it up, you could really harm someone, right? Same with herbal medicine. If you give the wrong plant to someone and it interferes with their prescription medicine, then you're in trouble. Or it's like harmful to their constitution, then you're in trouble. Or God forbid you harvest the wrong herb, you could kill someone. So it's like there is an element all the time of like learning and growth and like dedication to the field, which I think is like how you are framing professionalization. And like I know that education is like a big current of MSDN's work. There's lots of references to Skillshares and educations and kind of like mutual learning. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about your experiences with this, and like why is this kind of work in particular really important in terms of like medical self-defense?
Right, sure. I think education is also like this like very important part of like what we've been talking about in regards to professionalization, and like how accessible it is, like how it is accessible that you learn about plants, or you learn about how to undo harm, or how to prevent harm, etc. So we do consider it incredibly important to have this as like one of the focuses of Medical Self-Defense Network, to be able to provide, to be able to organize and provide education and training in particular, to be able to organize education of various sorts, including like training or like seminars, to as many people as we can, and to grow that capacity, and but also to provide training for each other, right? Because one of the benefits of being organized in such a network is that you have access to people who are professing the field you might not have come across otherwise in your region or in the place where you are organized. So that means that we see it as important to grow as holistic as possible capacity to grow that capacity that should be as holistic as possible, for this like healthcare system that we would like to see, and that like the sharing and education and mutual learning is incredibly important in this, because that's how this knowledge becomes accessible.
Nice. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's like different layers. Like there's people who maybe identify as some kind of like healthcare worker or health professional, or someone who's like dedicated to their craft, who are like, like constantly self-educating or going to trainings, or like trying to build their like kind of healing, health, medical knowledge base. But then, like you mentioned about trying to create healthcare systems without like dependent patients. So there's also this element of like, hey, even if you're not like a healthcare worker, like you need to have like as much autonomy over your health as possible, right? Like understanding your own body, understanding what's going on for you, being involved in, diagnosing any like health challenges you're experiencing, knowing how to potentially like make medicine for yourself, whether that's like herbal medicine or kind of like home remedies to like support the immune system, or whether that's like more, like basic first aid, right? Like of, how do I treat this thing at home so that I don't have to go to the emergency department and sit in a hospital for like 10 hours and catch COVID for something that's unnecessary, right? To go to hospital for. So yeah, it's kind of, I can see how like education is like all different directions, right? Like not just healthcare workers or professionals, but also like the people, right? And I think, we have this like internet, so it's like, wow, everyone's like reading all about their own stuff on the internet and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, it's such a like shallow response to something like really, really meaningful. Like, and I think capitalism, sorry, I'm totally going on a rant here, but like capitalism like totally destroys the relationship to your own body. Like, you're never taught in school what your nervous system is or how it makes you feel, or like understanding how you can sleep better or digest your food better. Like all of that self-care knowledge is just like not there, right? And then you grow up and you have to just like pull it from all these different places.
Yeah.
But yes, but I don't know if you have anything to say around that, but like, is MSDN mostly focused on these educations for people already like engaged in like the healthcare infrastructure and like the self-defense structures and the different health projects? Or is there like a kind of bigger focus on like general kind of like popular education around health?
I think we are at the point when we are trying to build up our standards and our educational programs and bring together the groups and the collectives who can provide more. So, and we're like developing this practice. And I think that's an ultimate goal, like the popular education and popular access to this knowledge is something that we have ahead of us. And I agree with what, like you said, like, as you know, like this is a huge responsibility and this has to be organized really, really well. And so I think we're not rushing anywhere, and we are taking it one step at a time. And like both like let's say training programs that are like specific for particular groups or collectives or organizations is something that is important, but also more popular education in the area of healthcare is something that we aim for, and something that is going to happen in the following years.
Nice. And then one of the other questions I had was about on the website and stuff, you talk about like cultivating solidarity in the medical field. And I just wondered like what you mean by this. And then I think my last question was, really like really making it tangible of like, what does like a liberating health system look like compared to state healthcare? Like I know in, like this call with the comrade in Tennessee was like, it's very shocking about like the system in the so-called US and like the absolute lack of access to healthcare, and like how kind of like horrific and unjust that is, and how it's, connected to all these forms of oppression, from racism to transphobia to misogyny, but for example, in England, I think one of the barriers around people organizing around healthcare access is because we literally have like a national health service, right? Like that was born from the labor movement. But it is really like how the state is really sustaining itself. Like everyone is very invested in the NHS. Like during the pandemic, it was like clap for the NHS, and at the same time it's being like completely destroyed, like simultaneously destroyed and taken apart and privatized and sold to the highest bidder in lots of ways. But in other ways it does really like sustain the state because it's seen as like this provider of our needs. And I just wondered, like, what do you think self-defense means, like, in contrast to the state, like, performatively trying to meet our needs? Like, we know that the state doesn't meet our needs, but like, does that make any sense? Sorry, another little
it
rant.
does. Oh, this is really cool. I mean, for the first question, like the solidarity in medical field, I think this ultimately means like seeing that we have a common cause with so many groups and so many people and collectives and organizations and associations and like different like individuals, and understanding that we do have the same cause and we do similar work leads us to support each other. And I think that with that organized support, we can achieve so much more than we could ever achieve as if we worked in a more like isolated way. So that's like what I think in terms of like solidarity. It's also like it's also building this understanding that we are connected to each other. Like even if I live on that end of the earth, and then there is like this collective or this person on entirely other side of the planet, the issues and situations that we face have something in common. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but we are facing things that are coming from the same root. That means that we have to be in solidarity with each other, because that kind of similarities in the oppression or in the problems that we're facing also create similarities in the ways we are resisting and in the ways we are organizing ourselves. And we should support each other to be successful. And I think that mutual support, in order to be successful and in order to be part of something big together, is exactly what solidarity is. I guess there's no one like definition of solidarity in these terms, and I can imagine that other people could bring also other definitions of solidarity as well. But that's how I say it. And in terms of how the healthcare system that we're talking about could look like, this is such a huge question, and I absolutely love talking about this. I think that first of all, we should be able to answer that kind of question, because if we want to offer an alternative to what's existing, we have to be able to formulate what is that we are offering. At the same time, I think that it is important to be honest and pointed out that we do not offer a centralized, unified solution for for everything and everyone. A lot of things also have to be guided by the social developments in society, because there are social movements in society. There are so many people with so many perspectives, and it is important that our visions for the future and our proposals for the future are also more flexible, to be able to include other realities and other needs that we might not have been aware of. But speaking more like practically to the point, I think that healthcare system as we're talking about would be a decentralized healthcare system. First of all, it cannot be reliant on a central structure that is going to apply the same. How do you call it? Do you say in English to apply the same meter?
Like meter is in like measuring, or
yeah. So that's not going to apply the same measure on everything and everyone, but instead that kind of decentralized healthcare system should be able to empower the differences between different regions and between different contexts that people are facing, but also reinforce this understanding of globality and like how healthcare issues are connected to something that might happen, on the entirely other side of the planet, right? Like all the oil spills and the pollution, the climate change is like incredibly interconnected over the entire globe. So that decentralization, I think, is really important. And I think autonomy is another important aspect of that, because making people having more knowledge of self and others, knowing how to take care of self and others, and how to let others to take care of yourself is very important. And in fact, solves a lot of things that now like central healthcare system is like very that people are very reliant on the self-care system, on the healthcare system to solve that for them. So I don't necessarily say like, okay, there are going to be no hospitals, there are going to be no doctors, there are going to be like no professionalization. Just like, like people are gonna like, know how to fix everything themselves and for themselves. But I think imagining a different healthcare system is talking about principles. It's about the goals and principles that we're striving for, and according to which we want to reorganize things, and how things are going to look like in terms of like practically, I think is something that must come out of it. Must come out of that discussion. And the answers will not be the same for every place and every context. It might mean something entirely different in all different places where people live.
Yeah, and that's what's like beautiful, right, about like struggles for liberation, is that like, like with this podcast interview, like I think people probably want like this 10-point plan of like, oh, what is medical self-defense? Like, it is this, it is this, it is this. And these are the 6 principles. And it's like, it's just so beyond that, right? Like, it's so more like how we think and our worldview. And like, yeah, like you mentioned, like decentralization and autonomy, and the fact that like all of these different like autonomous regions will like self-determine like what like medical self-defense means to them, right? Or what healthcare means to them, like what infrastructure that means, whether that's hugely investing community resources in hospitals, or whether that's like having mobile people's clinics or more abortion access or whatever. It's like, and I think that's why MSDN is kind of inspiring and powerful, is because like it's not creating this like homogenous, hey, you have to sign up to this list of like 10 commandments, like it's more like what, you define what it means for you, where you are in your context, but we're guided by these like principles of, like structures of autonomy and, challenging systems of oppression, and recognizing that like, we're part of something bigger, and that we're kind of like needs led by society, and also recognizing that like tons of that already exists. Like people are already like hugely self-organizing, like it is the people who run like the National Health Service in England, like it is, okay, it's the state and there's lots of managers and structure like this, but actually it is really those like nurses on those wards that know what they're doing, right? Who are, working with each other to organize healthcare. Okay, so that was really inspiring. I just wondered if there is anything else that we've missed that has come up for you around like medical self-defense, like any recommended reading or resources. Just before we finish.
No, that's it. Like, thank you so much for giving us this space to talk and discuss and express our views and invite people to organize with us. That's pretty much it.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityApothecary.org/podcast.